A lone Apache warrior rides into the heart of the desert, only to find a white woman bound and being whipped by outlaws. What happens next will ignite a fury that changes both their fates forever. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the rugged terrain of Apache territory in the summer of 1876. Swift Eagle, a respected warrior of the Chiricahua Apache tribe, moved silently through the rocky landscape. His keen eyes scanned the horizon, alert to any sign of danger or intrusion into his people's ancestral lands. At 32 years of age, Swift Eagle had earned his name through both his speed in battle and his sharp perception. Deep scars across his copper skin told stories of past conflicts with both rival tribes and the ever-encroaching white settlers. His long black hair was tied back with a leather cord, and he wore simple buckskin trousers and moccasins that allowed him to move without sound. Swift Eagle had been tracking a group of riders since dawn. Something about their movements seemed suspicious. They traveled in haste but made frequent stops, their path erratic as if avoiding the main trails. This was not the behavior of honest travelers. White men with secrets, he muttered to himself in his native tongue, crouching behind a large boulder that offered both shade and concealment. From his vantage point high on the rocky ridge, Swift Eagle could see the small group of 5 riders below. They appeared to be outlaws, rough-looking men with unshaven faces, dusty clothes, and firearms prominently displayed. But what caught his attention was the 6th member of their party, a woman bound and riding double with one of the men. Her hands were tied, and even from this distance, Swift Eagle could see that her dress was torn and her face bruised. A prisoner, he observed, his dark eyes narrowing. Swift Eagle had no love for the white settlers who continued to encroach upon Apache lands, but he held even less regard for men who abused women. He had lost his wife and young daughter to a cavalry attack 3 winters ago, and the memory of their suffering still burned within him. While tribal elders counseled distance from white people's conflicts, Swift Eagle could not simply ride away. He decided to follow the group and learn more. Perhaps this woman was a criminal herself, though something in her demeanor suggested otherwise. The outlaws were heading toward an abandoned mining camp that Swift Eagle knew well, a place once bustling with activity, but now deserted after the silver had played out. As twilight approached, the group made camp in the ruins of the mining settlement. They tied the woman to a post near their campfire, her fear visible even from Swift Eagle's distant position. The men passed a bottle between them, their voices growing louder as night fell. Swift Eagle circled the camp carefully, finding a position where he could hear their conversation. The woman remained silent, her head bowed. "She ain't talking, Butch," one of the men said, a tall figure with a ragged beard. "Maybe we should convince her a little more forcefully." The one called Butch, clearly the leader, took a long drink from the bottle. "We got 3 days before her fancy banker father's deadline. She'll talk, or she'll wish she had. That money's hidden somewhere, and she knows where. Her pa's probably got the law looking for her by now," said another man nervously. Butch laughed harshly. "Let 'em look. Nobody knows this territory like we do. By the time they find her, we'll be long gone with old man Harrison's money." Swift Eagle processed this information. The woman was being held for ransom, or perhaps to reveal the location of some hidden wealth. Either way, she was innocent of any crime besides being the daughter of a rich man. As the night deepened, the outlaws eventually fell into drunken slumber, leaving only one man on watch, a young, nervous-looking fellow who struggled to keep his eyes open. Swift Eagle waited patiently, watching as the guard's head drooped repeatedly. When the guard finally succumbed to sleep, Swift Eagle moved silently into the camp. He approached the woman cautiously, placing one hand gently over her mouth to prevent her from crying out in alarm. Her eyes widened in terror at the sight of him, but he raised his finger to his lips in the universal gesture for silence. "I mean no harm," he whispered in English, a language he had learned years ago from a missionary who had visited his tribe before tensions escalated. His accent was thick but understandable. "These men hold you against your will?" The woman nodded, tears welling in her frightened eyes. "I am Swift Eagle of the Chiricahua. I will help you if you wish to escape." Hope flickered across her face, but then she glanced fearfully at the sleeping outlaws. She leaned forward slightly and whispered, "They'll kill us both." "Perhaps," Swift Eagle acknowledged with the frankness of a warrior. "Or perhaps they will die instead. What is your name?" "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Harrison." Swift Eagle nodded once. "Rest now, Sarah Harrison. I will return tomorrow night. Be ready." Before she could respond, he slipped back into the darkness, leaving as silently as he had come. As he made his way back to his hidden camp, Swift Eagle considered his options. He was 1 against 5, and though his skills as a warrior were considerable, those were not favorable odds. He would need a plan, and perhaps some help. The following day, Swift Eagle observed the outlaw camp from different positions, studying their routines and weaknesses. The man called Butch was growing increasingly impatient with Sarah's silence about some hidden money. By midday, the tension in the camp was palpable even from Swift Eagle's distant vantage point. "You're testing my patience, Miss Harrison," Butch growled, pacing before Sarah, who remained tied to the post. The summer heat was brutal, and Swift Eagle could see that they had given her little water. "Your daddy's money is ours one way or another. You can make this easy or hard on yourself." Sarah lifted her chin defiantly despite her obvious exhaustion. "I've told you already. I don't know where my father keeps his business funds. The bank is where money belongs, not buried in the desert like some pirate's treasure." Butch's face contorted with rage. He grabbed a leather whip that hung from his saddle. "Your pa withdrew $10,000 the day before we took you. It ain't in the bank, and it wasn't at your house. That leaves you, princess." Swift Eagle's jaw tightened as he watched Butch unfurl the whip. The other outlaws formed a loose circle around Sarah, their expressions ranging from anticipation to discomfort. "Last chance to talk before I start reminding you of your manners," Butch said, cracking the whip against the ground for emphasis. Sarah's voice trembled but remained resolute. "I don't know anything about any money." The first lash caught her across the shoulder, tearing her already damaged dress and drawing a cry of pain. Swift Eagle's hand instinctively moved to the knife at his belt. Among his people, such treatment of a woman, any woman, would never be tolerated. Before Butch could strike again, the youngest outlaw stepped forward. "Butch, maybe this ain't the way. If she really don't know—" "Shut your mouth, Billy," Butch snapped. "You're too soft for this business. She knows, and she'll tell us before I'm done." The second lash fell, and Sarah's scream echoed through the abandoned mining camp. Swift Eagle had seen enough. His original plan to wait for nightfall evaporated like morning dew under the harsh desert sun. He would not stand by while this brutality continued. With swift, deliberate movements, Swift Eagle readied himself. He checked his knife, a prized possession with a bone handle, and a blade that had tasted the blood of many enemies. He also carried a tomahawk and had brought his bow and a quiver of arrows. The odds remained unfavorable, but sometimes boldness was its own advantage. He made his way down from his observation point, using the ruined structures of the mining camp for cover. The outlaws were focused entirely on Sarah and Butch's cruelty, making Swift Eagle's approach easier than anticipated. When he was within striking distance, Swift Eagle nocked an arrow and took careful aim. The twang of his bowstring was followed immediately by a scream as his arrow found its mark in the shoulder of the outlaw, standing furthest from Sarah. The man collapsed, clutching at the shaft protruding from his body. Chaos erupted instantly. The outlaws scrambled for their weapons, shouting in confusion as they tried to determine where the attack had come from. Swift Eagle fired 2 more arrows in rapid succession. One missed its mark, but the other struck an outlaw in the leg, bringing him down with a howl of pain. Then, dropping his bow, Swift Eagle drew his knife and tomahawk and charged into the clearing. "Apache!" one of the remaining outlaws shouted in terror, fumbling with his revolver. Swift Eagle moved like his namesake, closing the distance before the man could aim properly. The tomahawk struck with deadly precision, and the outlaw crumpled to the ground. Butch and the young one called Billy were the only ones left standing. Billy fired wildly, his bullet whizzing past Swift Eagle's ear. With a powerful throw, Swift Eagle sent his knife spinning through the air. It embedded itself in Billy's thigh, and the young outlaw fell with a scream of agony. Now it was just Butch, who had positioned himself behind Sarah, using her as a shield with a revolver pressed to her temple. "Stay back, you red devil," Butch snarled, his face contorted with fear and rage. "One more step and she dies." Swift Eagle halted, his chest heaving from exertion and the rush of battle. His dark eyes locked with Sarah's terrified but hopeful gaze. "You are a coward who hides behind a woman," Swift Eagle said calmly in his accented English. "My people would never honor such a warrior." "I don't give a damn about your people's honor," Butch spat. "Now back away or I'll put a bullet in her pretty head." Swift Eagle took one step backward, then another, his mind racing for a solution. The wounded outlaws were moaning on the ground, one attempting to crawl toward a fallen pistol. "That's right," Butch said, gaining confidence. "Now you're going to turn around and disappear back into the hills, savage. This ain't your business." "She is innocent," Swift Eagle replied. "That makes it my business." Butch laughed harshly. "Innocent? There ain't no innocent white women where Indians are concerned. You think she'd shed a tear if it was your women being whipped?" Sarah's voice suddenly rang out clear despite her fear. "That's not true. Please don't leave me with him." Swift Eagle saw the desperation in her eyes, the same look he had seen in his wife's eyes before she was killed. In that moment, his path became clear. "I will go," he said, slowly backing away further. "But first, give the woman water. She will die in this heat without it, and then you will never find your money." Butch hesitated, then nodded toward a canteen lying nearby. "Kick it over here, then get lost." Swift Eagle moved toward the canteen, stooping to pick it up. As his fingers closed around it, he also grasped a handful of dust from the ground. In one fluid motion, he straightened and threw the dust directly into Butch's eyes. The outlaw reeled backward, temporarily blinded and firing his revolver wildly into the air. Swift Eagle lunged forward, tackling Butch and sending them both crashing to the ground. The gun flew from Butch's hand as they rolled in the dust. Butch was heavier and fought with the desperate strength of a cornered animal. His fist connected with Swift Eagle's jaw, sending a shock of pain through the Apache's head. But Swift Eagle had been trained in hand-to-hand combat since childhood, and quickly regained his advantage. A series of rapid strikes left Butch dazed. Swift Eagle retrieved his knife from the wounded Billy's leg, eliciting another scream from the young outlaw. With the bloodied blade now pressed against Butch's throat, the fight was over. "The woman comes with me," Swift Eagle declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. Butch, his face bloodied and his eyes filled with hatred, managed a defiant snarl. "You're dead, Indian. Both of you. When my brother Jake finds out about this." Swift Eagle struck Butch with the handle of his knife, rendering him unconscious. He quickly moved to Sarah, cutting her bonds with a single slice of his blade. "Can you ride?" he asked urgently. She nodded, rubbing her chafed wrists. "Yes, I think so." "Then we must go quickly. These men will not stay defeated for long." Swift Eagle helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed slightly from exhaustion and pain. He then retrieved his arrows and gathered the outlaw's weapons, throwing them down a deep mine shaft except for one revolver which he tucked into his belt. They took two of the outlaw's horses and within minutes were galloping away from the mining camp, heading deeper into Apache territory, where few white men dared to follow. As they rode deeper into the rugged landscape, the sun began its descent behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the terrain. Swift Eagle led the way, occasionally glancing back to check on Sarah. Despite her obvious exhaustion and the pain from her injuries, she maintained a steady pace, her determination evident in the set of her jaw. After several hours of hard riding, Swift Eagle guided them into a narrow canyon. The path wound between towering rock walls that provided natural protection and concealment. A small stream trickled along the canyon floor, its gentle sound a welcome relief from the tense silence that had accompanied their flight. "We will rest here," Swift Eagle announced, reining his horse to a stop near the water. "The horses need to drink, and we must tend to your wounds." Sarah nodded gratefully, slipping awkwardly from her saddle. Her legs buckled as she hit the ground, and Swift Eagle moved quickly to catch her before she fell. "Thank you," she murmured, embarrassment coloring her cheeks as she steadied herself against him. "I'm not usually so weak." "You have shown great strength," Swift Eagle replied, helping her to a smooth rock beside the stream. Many warriors would have broken under such treatment. He left her to rest while he saw to the horses, removing their saddles and allowing them to drink from the stream. From his saddlebag, he retrieved a small pouch of dried meat and a collection of herbs wrapped in a piece of buckskin. Returning to Sarah, he offered her the meat. "Eat, you need strength." She accepted it gratefully, tearing into the tough jerky with surprising vigor. While she ate, Swift Eagle examined her wounds with a critical eye. The lash marks across her shoulders and back had torn through her dress and broken the skin in several places. "I must clean these wounds," he said, his tone practical rather than apologetic. Infection in this heat could be deadly. Sarah hesitated, then nodded her understanding. "I appreciate your help, though I'm not accustomed to such directness." A faint smile touched Swift Eagle's lips. "My people do not share the white man's discomfort with the human body, but I will respect your customs as much as possible." With gentle efficiency, Swift Eagle helped Sarah turn so that her back was to him. He used his knife to carefully cut away the torn fabric around her wounds, leaving her modesty intact while still allowing him access to the injuries. Using water from the stream and a clean piece of buckskin, he began washing away the dirt and dried blood. Sarah winced, but made no sound of complaint. When the wounds were clean, Swift Eagle crushed some of his herbs into a paste. "This will sting," he warned, "but it will prevent the bad spirits of illness from entering the wounds." "Bad spirits?" Sarah questioned, a hint of skepticism in her voice despite her situation. Swift Eagle applied the herbal paste to her lacerations. "That is how my people describe it. Your doctors might speak of tiny creatures too small for the eye to see. The meaning is the same, something that brings sickness into the body." Sarah's shoulders relaxed slightly. "You speak English very well. A missionary lived with my people when I was a boy. He taught me his language before the soldiers came and the fighting began." Swift Eagle's voice remained neutral, but there was an undercurrent of old pain beneath his words. As he finished treating her wounds, Sarah turned to face him. In the fading light, her features seemed softer, the fear in her eyes replaced by something more complex, curiosity mixed with cautious gratitude. "Why did you help me?" she asked directly. "Your people and mine? We haven't been friends." Swift Eagle sat back on his heels, considering her question carefully before answering. "There is a difference between your people as a whole and you as a person. What those men did was wrong by any tribe's standards." He paused, memories surfacing that he usually kept buried. 3 winters ago, my wife and daughter were killed by bluecoat soldiers. My wife was beaten as you were before they shot her. No woman deserves such treatment." Sarah's expression shifted to one of genuine sorrow. "I'm so sorry, that's terrible." She hesitated, then added, "Not all white men would approve of such actions either." "Perhaps," Swift Eagle acknowledged with a slight nod, "just as not all Apache would have helped you. We are individuals before we are members of our tribes." They fell silent as darkness settled fully around them. Swift Eagle built a small, nearly smokeless fire, positioning it deep within the canyon, where its light would not be visible from a distance. As they sat beside the modest flames, Sarah finally spoke again. "My father isn't actually hiding money, you know. Butch and his gang robbed the bank 2 weeks ago, but my father, as bank manager, had moved the largest deposits to the new safe the day before. They didn't get what they expected, so they took me instead." Swift Eagle nodded thoughtfully. "And they believe your father knows where this new safe is located?" "The safe isn't hidden. It's right there in the bank. But it has a combination lock that only my father knows. They thought if they took me, he would either pay a ransom or reveal the combination." She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the lingering desert heat. "What happens now? Where are you taking me?" "There is a trading post 3 days' ride from here," Swift Eagle explained. "The man who runs it, Mackenzie, is fair to my people. He will help you return to your family." Sarah's brow furrowed. 3 days? But what if Butch and his men follow us? They are injured, and we have their horses. Even if they manage to follow, they would not find this place easily. Swift Eagle gestured to the narrow canyon around them. "Few white men know these paths. But you mentioned Butch has a brother, Jake. What if he has more men?" Swift Eagle's expression remained impassive, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Then we will deal with them if the time comes. For now, you should rest. Tomorrow's ride will be long." He offered her his blanket, which she accepted after a moment's hesitation. As she settled down near the fire, Swift Eagle took up a position at the canyon entrance, his rifle across his knees and his senses alert to any sound that might indicate pursuit. Hours passed, and the night grew deeper. The desert transformed in the darkness, cooler, quieter, yet somehow more alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. Swift Eagle remained vigilant, but his thoughts wandered to the woman sleeping by the fire. She was unlike any white woman he had encountered before. There was a resilience to her that reminded him of the women of his tribe, a strength that went beyond mere physical endurance. In another life, another world, perhaps they might have been friends. His contemplation was interrupted by the sound of soft footsteps. Sarah approached, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "You should be sleeping," he said quietly. "I tried," she replied, sitting down beside him with a respectful distance between them. "But every time I close my eyes, I see Butch and that whip." Swift Eagle nodded in understanding. "The memories of fear do not fade quickly." "Do your memories fade?" she asked hesitantly. "Of your family, I mean." For a long moment, Swift Eagle was silent, gazing out at the star-filled sky. "No," he finally answered. "They do not fade, but you learn to carry them differently, like stones in a pouch that gradually becomes smoother with time." Sarah considered this metaphor, then said softly, "Thank you for saving my life today. I won't forget it." "No thanks are needed for doing what is right," Swift Eagle replied simply. They sat together in companionable silence until Sarah eventually dozed off, her head drooping against the canyon wall. Swift Eagle gently adjusted her position so she wouldn't wake with a stiff neck, then resumed his watch, a new resolve settling in his heart to see this woman safely home, regardless of the dangers that might lie ahead. Dawn broke with a palette of fiery colors stretching across the eastern sky. Swift Eagle, who had maintained his vigil through the night, watched as the first rays of sunlight illuminated Sarah's sleeping form. In sleep, the tension had melted from her features, making her appear younger and more vulnerable. He allowed her a few more minutes of rest while he prepared for their journey. The horses were watered and saddled, and he had refilled their canteens from the stream. When everything was ready, he gently touched Sarah's shoulder. "We must go," he said as she stirred. "It is safer to travel while the sun is low." Sarah awakened quickly, grimacing slightly as her movements aggravated her injuries. Swift Eagle helped her to her feet and offered her some dried berries and nuts from his provisions. "Your wounds," he inquired as she ate. "How do they feel?" "Painful," she admitted, "but cleaner somehow. Your medicine seems to be working." Swift Eagle nodded with satisfaction. "Good. I will check them again tonight." They mounted their horses and set out, Swift Eagle leading them through a labyrinth of canyons and dry riverbeds that constituted a hidden network of trails known primarily to the Apache. By midday, they had covered significant ground, the landscape gradually changing as they moved eastward, the stark desert giving way to areas of sparse vegetation. As they paused to rest the horses in the shade of a rocky outcropping, Swift Eagle suddenly went still, his head tilted slightly as he listened intently. "What is it?" Sarah whispered, recognizing the alertness in his posture. "Horses," he replied tersely. "Several riders moving fast." Sarah's face paled. "Butch?" "Perhaps." Swift Eagle quickly led their horses deeper into the shadows of the rocks. "Stay here. Do not move." Before she could protest, he had scaled the outcropping with remarkable agility, disappearing from view. From his elevated position, Swift Eagle had a clear view of the surrounding terrain. In the distance, dust rose from the hooves of approaching riders, 6 or 7 by his estimation. Moving with purpose rather than caution, he recognized the lead rider even from this distance. The man was larger than Butch, with a distinctive red bandana around his neck. Jake Thornton, Butch's older and more dangerous brother, known throughout the territory for his ruthlessness. Somehow, word had reached him quickly about his brother's predicament. Swift Eagle descended rapidly to where Sarah waited anxiously. "Jake Thornton and his men," he confirmed grimly. "They are following our trail." Fear flashed in Sarah's eyes, but she quickly mastered it. "What do we do?" "We cannot outrun them with tired horses," Swift Eagle reasoned aloud. "And we cannot reach the trading post before they catch us." He scanned their surroundings with a tactical eye, making a swift decision. "There is a place nearby, an old Apache stronghold. The entrance is hidden and defensible. We might stand against them there." Sarah nodded resolutely. "Then let's go." They mounted quickly and rode at a fast trot, Swift Eagle leading them on a circuitous route designed to confuse pursuit. After half an hour of hard riding, they reached what appeared to be a solid rock wall at the base of a steep cliff. Swift Eagle dismounted and led Sarah to a narrow fissure, almost invisible unless one knew precisely where to look. "The horses cannot fit," he explained, helping her down from her saddle. "We must leave them." "Won't that give away our position?" Sarah asked. Swift Eagle nodded. "Eventually, but it might buy us time." He removed his rifle and ammunition from his saddle, along with a water skin and his remaining weapons. "Quickly now." He led Sarah through the fissure, which opened into a remarkable hidden canyon. Ancient dwellings were carved into the rock walls, accessible by handholds and narrow ledges. A perfect defensive position, used by Apache warriors for generations. "My grandfather brought me here as a boy," Swift Eagle explained as he helped Sarah climb to one of the higher dwellings. "He said it had sheltered our people since before memory." Once inside the stone room, Swift Eagle moved to the opening that served as both door and window. From this position, they had a clear view of the approach while remaining well concealed. "What happens when they find us?" Sarah asked quietly, settling beside him with her back against the cool stone wall. "They will try to reach us," Swift Eagle replied matter-of-factly, "and we will stop them." Hours passed with agonizing slowness. The sun climbed to its zenith and began its descent without any sign of Jake and his men. Swift Eagle remained vigilant, his rifle ready, while Sarah dozed fitfully beside him, exhaustion temporarily overcoming her fear. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Swift Eagle's sharp ears caught the sound of approaching riders. He gently woke Sarah, placing a finger to his lips to indicate silence. Together they watched as Jake Thornton and his men discovered their abandoned horses. "They're here somewhere," Jake's voice carried clearly in the still desert air. "Find them." The outlaws spread out, searching the base of the cliff. It wouldn't be long before they discovered the fissure. Swift Eagle checked his rifle and positioned himself for the best angle of fire. "Sarah," he said quietly, "take this." He handed her the revolver he had taken from the outlaws. "Use it only if necessary." Her hands trembled slightly as she accepted the weapon, but her grip was firm. "I've never shot anyone before. I hope you will not need to," Swift Eagle replied. "But it is better to have the choice." One of the outlaws shouted triumphantly, "Boss, over here! I found a gap in the rocks!" Swift Eagle's muscles tensed as Jake and his men converged on the fissure. "When I begin shooting," he instructed Sarah, "stay low and away from the opening." She nodded, fear evident in her eyes but determination in the set of her jaw. The first outlaw to enter the hidden canyon fell immediately to Swift Eagle's precise shot. The others scattered for cover, returning fire blindly toward the cliff dwellings. Bullets chipped the ancient stone around them, sending fragments flying. "I count 5 left," Swift Eagle said calmly, reloading, including Jake. The gunfight continued sporadically as the outlaws attempted to advance while staying sheltered. Swift Eagle's superior position gave him an advantage, but the outlaws had numbers on their side. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Jake apparently lost patience. "Rush them all at once," he commanded his men. "They can't get all of us." 4 figures darted from their cover, racing toward the base of the cliff where crude handholds offered access to the dwellings. Swift Eagle fired rapidly, dropping 2 before they reached the wall. A third fell halfway up the climb, tumbling back to the ground with a sickening thud. The fourth, a lean man with a scarred face, made it to a ledge below their position and was working his way toward them when Sarah leaned out and fired her revolver. The shot went wide, but it startled the outlaw enough that he lost his grip and fell, landing badly on the rocks below. "Good," Swift Eagle nodded approvingly. "Now only Jake remains." As if on cue, Jake Thornton's voice boomed from below. "You've killed my brother and my men, you Apache devil. I'm coming for you now." A massive figure emerged from cover, running not toward the cliff face but toward the fissure entrance. Swift Eagle realized with alarm that Jake was trying to escape, perhaps to bring reinforcements. He took careful aim and fired. Jake stumbled but didn't fall, disappearing into the fissure. Swift Eagle moved quickly, grabbing his knife and tomahawk. "Stay here," he ordered Sarah. "Do not follow, no matter what you hear." Before she could object, he was climbing down the ancient handholds with practiced ease. He followed Jake's blood trail through the fissure, emerging cautiously into the open desert beyond. The outlaw was attempting to mount one of the horses, his movements hampered by a wound in his side. "It is finished, Jake Thornton," Swift Eagle called out, standing tall with his tomahawk ready. "Surrender, and you may live." Jake turned with surprising speed for a wounded man, firing his pistol. The bullet grazed Swift Eagle's arm, but he barely flinched, advancing steadily toward the outlaw. "I'll die before I surrender to an Apache," Jake snarled, firing again and missing as Swift Eagle moved with the fluid grace of a practiced warrior. "Then you will die," Swift Eagle replied simply, closing the distance between them. Jake lunged with a Bowie knife, a desperate attack that Swift Eagle sidestepped easily. His tomahawk struck with terrible precision, and Jake Thornton collapsed in the dust. His reign of terror in the territory finally ended. Swift Eagle stood over the fallen outlaw, offering a brief prayer for the spirits of all who had died this day, friend and foe alike. Then he returned to the hidden canyon, calling out to Sarah so she would not be frightened by his approach. She met him at the bottom of the cliff, relief washing over her face when she saw he was largely unharmed. "It's over?" she asked. "It is over," he confirmed. "We are safe now." They spent one more night in the ancient dwelling, tending to Swift Eagle's minor wound and resting from the ordeal. In the morning, they gathered what they needed from the outlaw's supplies and selected the 2 strongest horses for their journey. The final 2 days of travel to Mackenzie's trading post passed without incident. As they rode, a quiet companionship developed between them. 2 people from vastly different worlds who had shared an extraordinary experience. When the trading post finally came into view, a collection of sturdy log buildings with the American flag flying above the main structure, Sarah turned to Swift Eagle. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Return to my people," he replied simply. "And you will return to yours." Sarah nodded, a complicated mix of emotions crossing her features. "My father will reward you generously for saving me." Swift Eagle shook his head. "I need no payment for doing what was right." They rode the final distance in silence. As they approached the trading post, several men emerged, hands hovering near their weapons at the unusual sight of an Apache warrior and a white woman riding together. "Miss Harrison?" one of them called out in disbelief. "Is that you?" "Yes," Sarah replied, recognizing one of her father's employees. "Yes, it's me." Swift Eagle remained stoically on his horse as Sarah was helped down and surrounded by the men, all talking at once in their relief and surprise. She turned back to him, breaking free of the welcoming committee. "Swift Eagle saved my life," she announced clearly to the gathered men. "He is to be treated with respect." The grizzled owner of the trading post, Mackenzie himself, stepped forward and extended a weathered hand towards Swift Eagle. "Any friend of Miss Harrison's is welcome here. Come inside, both of you." In the following days, arrangements were made for Sarah's return to her hometown. Her father arrived with an escort, his face lined with relief and gratitude when he embraced his daughter. To Swift Eagle's surprise, Harrison approached him without fear or prejudice. "I don't have words to express my thanks for what you did for my Sarah," the banker said, his voice thick with emotion. "If there's ever anything I can do for you or your people, you have only to ask." Swift Eagle considered this unexpected offer carefully. "There is land to the north of here that once belonged to my tribe. It has a sacred spring. Your government took it 5 summers ago." Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "I know the property. It's currently held by the bank after the rancher defaulted on his loans. I believe I could arrange for its return to your people." On the day of Sarah's departure, she sought out Swift Eagle one last time. They stood somewhat awkwardly outside the trading post. 2 people who had shared life and death but were now returning to worlds that rarely intersected peacefully. "I'll never forget what you did for me," Sarah said finally. "You changed how I see many things." Swift Eagle nodded, his usually impassive face softening slightly. "And you have shown me that there are good people among the white settlers. Perhaps someday our peoples will find a way to live together in peace." "I hope so," Sarah replied earnestly. "Goodbye, Swift Eagle. May your path be safe." "And yours," he answered, raising his hand in farewell. As Sarah's wagon pulled away, escorted by her father and his men, Swift Eagle remained at the trading post until it disappeared from view. Then he mounted his horse and turned north, toward the sacred lands that would soon be returned to his people. A small victory in a long struggle, and perhaps a first step toward the understanding that both he and Sarah now knew was possible between their worlds.